Hello or namaste. Welcome to Atypical Dikkate, a conversation podcast. I'm your host Samya, and in this podcast, I talk to fellow queer, neurodivergent, and disabled folks. This podcast is not just a repository of stories and experiences, but it is also a journey to build solidarity, queer intimacy, and a community while highlighting neglected issues, including sexual and reproductive health and rights. Today, I have Sai with me. Sai Nagarajan is a queer person passionate about LGBTQIA+ rights, disability rights, and menstrual advocacy, especially for queer persons with premenstrual disorders. They currently work with Periphery as program lead, enabling skilling and careers for transgender individuals. Sai also runs Project Hell Week, providing peer support for queer and trans persons with PMDs, and is a trained peer supporter. Welcome, Sai. Thank you for joining me today. Lots of excitement. I heard you went to some global platforms to talk more about the work you do. And without much discussions, I'll jump into the topic on SRHR and PMDs. So, can you share the story of how you realized you have PME and what that process of self discovery was like for you? Please feel free to elaborate as much as you can about PMDD and PME, what it is, so our listeners can get an understanding.
Talking a bit about what PMDs are, premenstrual disorders. I have a condition called PME, which is premenstrual exacerbation. There is also PMDD, which might be more familiar to some folks, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Both of these fall under a category called premenstrual disorders. Now, everyone might be familiar with PMS, which is where before your period, which is your luteal phase, you have certain symptoms like grogginess or moodiness. Very pop culture kind of characterizes it in a particular way, ties to certain genders in a certain way. PMDs are a more severe version of PMS, to be very simple about it. But that is also a huge reductive way to approach PMDs. PMDs are, we really do not know the exact cause of PMDD or PME, but it is understood to be a response to hormonal changes that occur in your menstrual cycles, which causes a deficiency in your serotonin, all of that. Then it's too sciencey, but to be very practical about it, this the way it manifests in people is you have extreme symptoms like very bad depression, where you're not able to get out of your bed for 14 days in a month. The other 14 days are better or perfectly fine for some folks. You have extreme chronic fatigue where you're not able to move your arm or get up and do your job. Suicidality is a major symptom. I think there is research showing that people with PMDD are 7 times more likely to attempt suicide than the rest of the population. So it's quite severe, and a lot of folks have lost their lives to PMDD. Specifically, PMDD I'm talking about because PME is very under researched. But PME also has a similar kind of symptoms and all of that. Now, the difference between these three terms, PMS, PMDD, PME, we spoke about PMS versus the PMDs, but PMDD is again the response to the hormones. But what distinguishes PME from PMDD is that premenstrual exacerbation is something that is on top of what is already existing in you. So, say you have an anxiety disorder or a depressive disorder or a bipolar disorder, PME exacerbates those symptoms. So, your symptoms, say your brain fog or dissociation, and we'll talk more about that later, or your anxiety, would be existing for the rest of the month as well, but in a lesser, significance. And during your luteal phase, which is your 2 weeks before your period, it becomes more pronounced. So that is the difference between PMDD and PME. Few folks with PMDD might not have any symptoms at all for the rest of the month. Now, going into my experience with discovering my PME, it had been a very interesting road. So I have PME, and the way I discovered that was I went through a traumatic period in my life, and I seek medication and therapy to help me through that. My anxiety became really bad, so the psychiatrist gave me a diagnosis of GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, and then I was on SSRIs for 7, 8, 6, 7 months. Now, I also weaned off these SSRIs with the help of my psychiatrist after that point in time. And when I was weaning off, next month and the next month after that, I noticed some weird symptoms right before my period. Until that point, I'd been menstruating for several years without much ado, and suddenly these symptoms came in, and my symptoms were primarily chronic fatigue and major dissociation. So I would feel for half the month as if I was just external to my own life, and also fatigue in the sense that I couldn't move. And at that point in time, I was also studying. I was doing a professional qualification and I used to have exams every third month. So I knew that I couldn't really afford to be so sick that I did not know what was happening to me for half of every month, because the rest of half of the month was just going in trying to figure out what just happened, and I couldn't focus on anything. So I realized that, okay, I need to act quick and at least understand what's happening, because I was scared that this was something else that was going on. I took all the tests, blah blah blah, and around March of 2020 is when I actually went to a medical professional for PMDD. At that point I already kind of knew, and the way I knew that was, I went to the internet, I put in my symptoms. Okay, I'm feeling like there is a weight on my head. And then after reading X number of articles and Reddit stories or whatever, I realized that was called brain fog. And then I noted that down. Similarly, for each and every symptom, okay, this is called chronic fatigue, not just tiredness, So I understood the difference between all of that, and I meticulously tracked my symptoms just to understand what was going on, because I just felt confusion. And through all of that, I chanced upon IAPMD, which is an organization that advocates for premenstrual disorders, PMDs, in a global scale. So came across their resources, articles, research, and understood that, okay, this is probably what I have. And then discovered the sad part, which is that not many people know about it. Medical professionals might be really dismissive about it, which made me research it even more obsessively and want to note down everything so that I wouldn't be dismissed. I tried going to a gynecologist that I had been going to for years, who was in the same city as I was. And she's a wonderful professional who's been really helpful in every other count. But of course, she diagnosed me with severe PMS and not PMDs. But she did give me the right treatment. She did take the correct approach to treating it, and that worked. But I was still craving that acknowledgement that what I have is not just PMS. And we'll talk more about why as well later. So I then started researching, okay, PMDD friendly gynecologists in India, blah blah blah. And then I chanced upon this particular doctor, and right before COVID hit, I I had an appointment with this person, and they listened to me for half an hour, and then they said, "Yeah, you have PME because you already have this anxiety disorder, and you have these symptoms throughout the month, and that's just getting worse during your luteal phase." And she gave me that language, so that is how I I understood what I had.
This was the reason why I directly asked you the question, because your bio itself has all these jargons, and we know how language can be inaccessible to a lot of people, which is why this gap exists, and the burden falls on vulnerable or marginalized folks, especially a lot of disabled folks, to try to find that language in order to communicate the pain that they are experiencing. And this pain is expected to go through it with a certain amount of grace, not to show it. And we discussed about this actually in the first episode. If you're listening, please go and check out the first episode as well. But yeah, coming back to it, and how queerness, neurodivergence, everything kind of intersects to exacerbate these challenges, and why then validation, support, and a diagnosis becomes important in this scenario. We'll talk more about this, and that is the question that I have for you. Like, how do factors like caste, gender, class, urban access influence a person's ability to receive a diagnosis for PMDs, and how has this played out in your journey?
Absolutely. And that's so important to highlight, because we are in a situation in India where we have privatized healthcare, and it's really something that is inaccessible to most people. The way that prices are for even getting an appointment with a gynecologist, 1,500 rupees for someone who might just spend 20 minutes, 25 minutes with you, listening to what you have to say. And is that affordable for most of us? I heavily doubt that. And I also live currently in Bangalore. When I was realizing my PME, I was in Chennai. So in these cities, we still have medical professionals who are exorbitantly expensive, who will definitely be harmful towards minoritized positions of identity, be it with regards to caste, gender. We know that doctors are primarily from Savarna Brahmin castes in India, which of course informs the standard and the way of care that they provide. I am from a position of privilege in that sense. And even for me, I had to search for 7 months by myself on the internet. And that again is a huge amount of social capital involved in that, right? How will I actually get this information? It's not that I go Google, hey, listen, I'm not able to wake up for 1 month, half the month every month. And then Google tells me, okay, you have to. That's not how it works. I need to actually articulate, I have to identify, articulate, and know where to go. I need to know what Reddit is. I need to know what these different websites are. That is so much social capital that comes from huge amounts of privilege. And that is not the case for so many people in India. So, absolutely, for someone with different marginalizations and minoritized identities, the situation in Indian healthcare is definitely not accessible. And as someone who is queer and trans myself, I was very sure that I wouldn't be hurt, and I had to put extra amounts of effort to even find someone who wouldn't blatantly misgender me or who would blatantly, and that took me that 8 months of time. And during that 8 months, I was actually still not medicated and not I was still suffering from all of these symptoms. Is that something that everyone should go through because medical professionals don't aren't educated enough? That shouldn't be the case for anybody. And of course, the language itself, when it comes to advocacy spaces or SRHR spaces, all of these spaces, right? We speak in certain ways, use certain words that might not really be the most, that not might even be in the reach of people who we work with, who supposing I'm again, I want to advocate for PMDs and I have to use these words. Would that make sense to someone who it does not have access to this kind of feminist language or advocacy space language? We really need to revisit it. At the same time, if I don't use this language, how will I concisely convey what I have? If I don't say I have a I have brain fog, how will I convey that? For instance, to someone in a succinct manner. Of course, I can explain, hey, listen, it feels like a pain on my head, but brain fog is just more understandable to medical professionals. And so there we have to adapt our language around what the other person can really understand. And that is a burden of labor on the person who is actually seeking support. Is that something that people need to again go through? I don't think so. If you're going to be already facing a lot of pain and sickness and you're going for help, do you need to be the person to also translate your experience into easily digestible manner for the other person to understand? That is a huge privilege that not everyone can as well. Like, I am someone who is able to do that. I know that for my partner, when they are having a flare up, they cannot really convert their pain and what they're experiencing into an easily digestible way for the doctor to understand. So again, that is another added layer of privilege that might not be really tied to an identity, but also like the way a person is naturally. I hope that kind of helps or adds to what you were saying.
Yeah, definitely. And that also leads to certain amount of imposter syndrome, right? Like, do we have it? Do we not have it? And even if you have access to those resources, which again is not easy, there is involved like a certain amount of labor, emotional, intellectual labor. And if you don't have access to those networks also, it's very difficult to navigate. And then there's another layer of imposter syndrome, right? Is my pain real? Okay, how many doctors do I need to visit? Who does that validation for me, right? So that lays another, I'm not sure if it's marginalization per se, but lived experiences, definitely. So, taking that ahead, we have spoken about the lack of awareness among medical professionals. So, what has been your experience navigating the medical system, and why is intersectional medical training so crucial in this space? Also, like if you have, any thoughts or access to resources for listeners who might relate to this and, might benefit, yeah, we would love to know about them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Doctors, and I'm going to come back to doctors because while PMDs need support from therapists, psychiatrists, as well as gynecologists or an endocrinologist, those folks also still matter. And if something you feel like something is off with your body, you're going to go to a doctor first. They need to absolutely be aware. And coming back to the Indian context, while across the globe you need to be aware of PMDs, obviously, to help someone with PMDs. You need to also be kind of thinking about the race context. You need to be thinking about the gender context, sexual orientation. In India, we have caste, and knowing Indian doctors, they're absolutely lacking in that department. And you also have the added thing of sexual orientation. Any doctor you're going to go to in India is going to ask, are you married? And this is in 2025. So I'm going to go to them with an issue with my menstruation. Obviously, they're going to ask, are you married? As a queer person going to a space like this. So, absolutely. And although PMDD is in the DSM 5 and all of that, I know for a fact that it is not included in Indian medical education. They still don't know what is the what support they need to provide, or they do not know about this about PMDs existing at all in the first place. And then you have the intersections of how do you actually consider your patient a human being, and how do you provide a human centered care when someone is entering your practice. All of that matters. And the reason why these identities even come into play is, like you were talking about, that imposter syndrome. As someone who is already not going to be listened to, and I will take my personal example only. Like if I am someone who is coming from as a queer non-binary person, I'm never going to be I'm always told that, okay, fine, you can't speak this way or that way, and I'm already going with a level of hesitancy. On top of that, PMDs, one of the major symptoms of PMDs is self-doubt and being very critical of oneself. This is again playing with my head when I'm going into a doctor's office. And this person does not understand that I have to jump through 5 hoops to even come to their book this appointment. As a neurodivergent person, am I able to, again, I have a tendency to ramble and have no point in what I'm saying. These things, this doctor needs to know and really understand, okay, fine, this is where this person I'm talking to, this is where they're coming from, and I need to have this in mind, and I need to be kind to this process. This is something that does not exist, and which is why thinking or talking about it in the context of PMDs also matters. And if I'm going to tell this particular situation where, okay, as a neurodivergent person with PMDs, I find my shirt to be too sensitive for me half the month more than the other half. I don't want to be dismissed. Something as simple as that. I don't have to say that I am a neurodivergent person in that sense. That the doctor should just understand that, okay, this is a person with an experience, and I need to validate them. And that is the kind of kindness, I would say, is really lacking across, even beyond identities and understanding different communities. Just kindness and validation, seeing the person as a human, is something that is lacking in today's Indian healthcare system. But I do, and maybe again, this is again a privilege because it is only present in certain pockets of India. But a lot of psychologists are being able to understand PMDs more, and being queer affirmative, being feminist, being anti-caste in their practices. And I know that this number is still too small for the billions of population that we are in India, but at least that way there is some progress. Again, this needs to cascade to other places too, not just Bangalore, Chennai, Mumbai, Delhi. But at least there you have a little bit more understanding. Whereas in the medical system as such, where you need more of it because it's a pathological system that already tends to pathologize different identities and has a history of violence, you still lack that kindness.
There's so much of invisibilization of experiences, right? And it's very highly gendered. Like even when you go to the doctors, you will experience that it's highly gendered, and if you fit a certain type of body or their perception of gender, your treatment or like their response depends on that as well. So it intensifies for menstruators who are already minoritized when it comes to gender, sexuality, especially queer and trans people. Would you have more insights into this?
Yes, absolutely. So, as a non-binary person, even in spaces, the doctors in India who might know about PMDs might not really understand non-binaries. It's as simple as that. I have gotten misgendered in doctors, but I've had to like be like, okay, fine, I'm gonna ignore that because I really need you to listen to me because I'm really struggling right now, and nobody should be doing that. For trans men and for non-binary trans mass people, menstruation is already a sore subject. Might be. There are folks who do not find it that way, but for a lot of people, especially again in bringing it back to India, where menstruation itself is a taboo, and we still have horrible practices going on for cis women who menstruate, wherein they're asked to separate from their families. You know, you can't touch this, you can't go meet that person. This is still continuing in 2020, 2025 in a very major, like I know that even my family practices it. If I go back to my family, can I actually go into the kitchen or like touch a vessel when I'm on my period? I'm sitting here talking about PMDs, but this is not a reality for me back at home. And this is from a very, privileged background as well. So, in that backdrop, obviously, a lot of people from non-binary, trans men backgrounds do feel a lot of taboo on their periods, and it takes an immense amount of courage to get yourself to a place where you are like, okay, I need help urgently. And the intensity of PMTs only make it sad because if at that amount of suffering that you're going through, to be very honest about it, you're still trying to not talk about it, right? Not you don't want to talk about it because it causes dysphoria or discomfort for you. Yeah, so that's where the situation is. And I also want to kind of like tie it to this term called episodic disabilities. So episodic disabilities in simple terms is basically where you are okay for one particular period of time, you experience wellness, quote unquote, and then the other period of time you are having certain disabilities, you are or you have disabling conditions, something like that, right? So that's what it means. So in simple terms, PMDDs or PME is an episodic disability, right? You half the month you're okay, other half of the month you're not okay, and then you're like already confused. This is because a popular narrative is also that you're either okay or you're not okay. That's the binary. You're already not in the binary because of your gender and other things, and you're already not in the binary because of your conditions that you're going through. It's just confusing, and yeah, that's the kind of navigation that one has to do. And this increases self-doubt and your self-critical thoughts that go on in your head, because you're like, okay, fine, half the month only I need help, other half month I'm okay, so I'm actually going to tough it out. 2 months it's okay, fine. I will push myself through. So I feel like we need to create spaces where people can actually feel comfortable. It's okay if you're not okay for like 2 days in a month also, that's still not okay. If you're not able to get out of your bed, it's not something that everyone experiences. And this is something that I've had to tell people, that it's not okay to go through pain. Like it's not a thing that everyone goes through, especially for people who are menstruators, because you're coming from that background of having to tolerate pain, like actual pain, because society tells, hey, that's everyone goes through it. Everyone goes has a period. Why are you making a big deal about it? That's what cis men tell us, and and I had to be like, that's not okay. And this is to my own sister. Even last month, she was asking me, I'm having these cramps every month, and I'm like, that we need to get that checked out. That's not okay. You don't have to go through it. We can find a way. That's the level, like we're still accepting pain and depression and suicidality because cis men tell us, or the society tells us, that it happens to everybody. That's why the diagnosis rates of PMDD is so low, because already you're filtering yourself saying, I'm sure everyone feels suicidal once in a while, right? They don't. Spoiler alert, they don't if you're listening.
I love how beautifully you have simplified this. Like, what does PMDD look like for a person in their everyday life? Because that's what it is, right? Like the dynamic nature of disability and chronic illness. And people sometimes say it so dismissively, oh, something is wrong with you all the time. Why is it only you all the time? But hey, that is the condition, right? 50% of the time I'll be okay, 50% I'll not be okay. And that is the nature of disability. But everything is in binary in this world, like you said, which is why people who navigate in between in the gray areas, it's very difficult to get that validation. And our worth as human being is also tied to our productivity, our capacity. How much are we able to give back to the world, to the society, to the job that we are doing? How do we communicate that we are sick whilst navigating these capitalist systems? It's a constant challenge and a constant negotiation. And not just at work, even within our families, within our friend circles. We don't feel comfortable saying all the time, hey, I'm not feeling like going out, right? Because that brings certain amount of shame, embarrassment, because we don't know how we'll be treated, right? So coming back to that, from relationships and work to sensory sensitivities and social life, how does having a chronic condition like PME shape day-to-day experiences? What challenges and insights come with navigating life through this lens, especially when navigating life in the current climate crisis?
So I will actually, I just realized that I missed something that you asked earlier, and we can actually talk about it now, which is resources for folks who might be wanting to understand more. And I think for my understanding of my own self as to what all PME was causing in my day to day life. There was this app that I downloaded when I was tracking called Me versus PMDD, and we can put that in the notes as well on the in the show notes. So I installed the app. They had a big list of symptoms, and one of the symptoms was, "Are you having relationship troubles for 2 weeks out of a month?" I was so mind blown by that because I never tied it to my period. And of course, like, you hear, oh, 2 weeks out of the month before your period, you get moody or whatever. That's again something that's like caricatured in the popular narrative. But like going to the, lot of people have lost their relationships due to PMDD and PME because of how their brain switches. So that could be a useful resource of just a glossary of different quote unquote symptoms. I also want to highlight that quote unquote symptoms in PMDs is not really like, oh, you have a cold, you have a fever. It's not like that, like it's not like that. It's like overwhelm is a symptom. Out of control is a symptom. If these are some things that you're feeling on a day-to-day basis, so say you wake up and you feel out of control, right? And I have that symptom as well. Like I experience that when my PME is like showing up, and I wake up and that means that, okay, oh my god, I need to actually do this. I need to make myself a coffee, and that feels like a major task. It's just me waking up, brushing my teeth, having a cup of coffee, which I do every day of every month. But when my PME shows up, it becomes a major task because I'm feeling very overwhelmed at the moment I wake up and I'm feeling out of control. Similarly, just going to my office might feel like a major task. Typing in an Excel sheet might feel like a major task because I am feeling brain fog. I've spoken about it multiple times, but that is one of my biggest symptoms and the first thing to start acting up when my PME goes out of control, right? That it really feels like an actual weight on my head and I can't open my eyes. They call it PMDD eyes, where your eyes are only half open. And every time I only come to realize that my PME has gotten bad when I take a picture and then I realize, oh, my eyes are actually not fully open. And, there's other experiences that you might feel too, like interpersonal conflicts. You might feel a higher sense of rejection, which is again something that might be something that you might be experiencing if you're already neurodivergent. It's called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or like you feel like a heightened sense of rejection in some instances, and that also is a part. It might be a part if you have a PMDD or a PME. And how does this manifest in real life? So, say you go to the shop and you wanted to buy, Kit Kat, not to support any company, but like if you want to buy yourself a chocolate, and the shopkeeper says it's not there, it might actually trigger you. As simple as that sounds. And maybe you have a job and you get an email, and that really puts you out of commission for the rest of the day because that email was too much to handle. Someone said, "Oh my God, I called you yesterday, but you didn't pick up my call." Very real. A lot of people do this unnecessary, but you might feel like, "How can this person say this to me?" Oh my God, I'm worthless. I can't even do my job. You go into bed, crash, cry, cannot get out of bed. So again, this is not something that a lot of people, only a certain group of people feel, only you feel during PMDs. But the intensity of it is of a different nature. And I cannot really convey how intense it is. It really feels like a physical pain. It really feels like a physical sensation. So that is how your day-to-day life might be affected. Like for instance, one of the choices I made because of my PME is I had two job offers, one with a deadline that was supposed to be an everyday deliverable, and the other was a job that was more monthly schedule oriented. And I chose the second job because I knew that everyday deliverables, I can do that for 2 weeks. I cannot do that for the next 2 weeks. Right? So this is how it guides even the bigger decisions in your life, like which job you take. And right now, I used to be in the corporate space, and now I work in the social sector. And something that really shapes my experience is having caregiver fatigue, which is where you give a lot of care for someone who might be suffering from a condition or might have a disability or just needs care for some or the other reason. And during COVID, it was also compassion fatigue for a lot of people where you really feel. And currently, we're in a situation where so much, I don't know if I can swear, but so much nonsense is going down in all parts of everywhere. We have a genocide happening, multiple genocides happening. We have the government falling. We have everyone's identities being, yeah, everything that's happening. We are constantly bombarded with nonsense, and trust me, it has an effect on your body. And if you are someone who already has pmdds PMDs for sure, or even mental illnesses and other disabilities as well, but I can speak from lived experience that absolutely changes your experience in a particular month. Such things. And for instance, the COVID vaccine made so many people with PMDs suicidal. People with PCOS as well. In fact, I had the COVID vaccine, the first vaccine, and my period was horrible for the next 6 months. I went to the doctor, and my doctor told me she also felt the same way because she has PCOS. Now, is this researched? And you can't refuse a COVID vaccine, right? I hope you're not refusing your vaccines, but is this researched for people with PMDs? Like something as simple as a vaccine that you need to take, to a job that you are choosing, or to your sector. I was talking about the sector and I just rambled on. But why I was talking about the social sector is you're working with people day in and day out, and that fatigue really takes a toll on how your PMD experience is as well. It might make it much worse. And you have to do so much more to manage it, to manage your emotional health, so that your experiences and your symptoms don't kind of take over and make you not be able to do your job that you really like. And that again is like a mental conundrum, right? Like you're like, I want to like actually support other people, but I'm not able to support myself because of my job. Things like this day to day that actually kind of play in, that might not be something that you thought was related to your period, but actually might be. So yeah, I hope that answers what you asked.
What about climate crisis? Because for me, the
Yes.
experiences that you shared, I don't think I had ever experienced that kind of pain, the kind of pain that I experienced last year during the summers, because they exacerbated everything like 100 times more. And I couldn't understand, why am I feeling like this? Why is everything so, like you said, right? It's too sensitive. The clothes are too sensitive. A tag is like annoying me, or like, the products, even sanitary products, or the whole navigating the whole experience of menstruating during that time. Would you like to shed a little more light on that?
Okay. So one of the major things is we are having increasing temperatures in a lot of places in India. I used to live in Chennai, and I have a major kind of response to temperature and like the textures of things. and the sound and the smell. So these are my three major major icks, if I can call it that. And in Chennai, anyone who's been to Chennai knows how horrible Chennai is, especially in the summers. And having that sensation, my body normally heats up very, very quickly. And during my PMDs, my body temperature itself increases as a baseline. So 2 weeks out of a month, I have like higher body temperature, and people think I actually have a fever. And in this, living in Chennai, it was absolute hell. There's no other ways about it, because I couldn't wear anything. Like I didn't want to wear anything. Because anything on me just felt like I was boiling. And moved to Bangalore. Been 2.5 years, and Bangalore climate has become so bad that this year it's predicted to reach 40 degrees Celsius this year. And I'm already dreading it, because and I do wanna emphasize on the fact that not just these smells, these temperatures, these textures on your body, not only do they trigger you, but also they make your experiences and your symptoms worse. If you're not going to be feeling okay because of something, it actually increases your maybe your fatigue or your overwhelm, feeling out of control. How do you control the climate? You can't. That increases your climate anxiety, which again is a baseline, but it just becomes worse. You just feel out of control of everything. It not just that, but it also increases your physical pain. Feeling like you can't wear anything. It makes you more tired. Like you can't walk as much. If you need to take the public transit to work, I take public transit to work. There's a lot of body odors and other such smells that come up in our public transit. It just feels like hell to commute to work. The noise feels like hell. It feels much worse. So you're already exhausted before you start your job, and you have to work a job. How do you do that? It's all tied to not just your individual experience. I feel like that's the baseline of. It's not just tied to your individual experience. Everything around you also impacts your experience of PMDs. We were talking earlier about the situation around the world and the human rights crisis that's been happening. That plays an effect too. The climate crisis, that plays an effect too. And this is not just an intellectual thing of, oh, this is just in my head, I'm worried about it. It's not just that. It's that every day, whatever you're experiencing and whatever you're going through, it has a direct impact on it. So for me, that's how it kind of you know impacts my everyday life.
And which is why peer support, friends, community care becomes all the more important, because everything can be too much exclusionary. So, and I'm so glad this collaboration is happening after almost like 1.5 years. I remember you reached out to me introducing Project Hell Week. So I'll come to that. You started Project Hell Week to create this safe peer support spaces for queer and trans menstruators, given all the exclusion folks face when it comes to these challenges. So according to you, what role do peer support networks play in countering traditional medical models, or how do they assist that process of navigating these exclusionary systems? And what do you see as the most urgent need for advocacy in India when it comes to PMDs?
Yeah. So peer support is again like a in my head it's like a revolution against like traditional modes, because traditional modes just pathologize you. Like for instance, I don't want to necessarily. I mean, there's no way to medically describe the impact that the climate crisis has on me. For instance, right? It's not a medical thing, although it kind of is, but not something that a doctor will definitely talk to me about. Maybe they should, but that's a whole different conversation that we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, you have very minimal spoons, as in you have many very minimal resources already that you're go you're already feeling out of control, you're confused. You can't really go and pay 1,500 to a doctor to have a conversation or a dialogue with them. Someone should support you with that, but unfortunately, it's not medical professionals, like we spoke about all of the reasons. And community wisdom is so important. Now, I have been through this entire journey, and I have thankfully come to a point where I'm able to kind of understand and listen to my own body, and that has come after a lot of work, to put it very simply. But even today, now my the doctor that gave me my diagnosis does not practice in India anymore. I don't have a doctor. If my PME ever gets worse, I do not know who to go to, and I'm in Bangalore with the mountain of privilege that I have. And the only place I go to is community, right? And because I am able to understand my own self, if I'm not able to, I can actually ask someone who has been through this or may have one idea, and we can all put our ideas together and really understand what's going on with ourselves. Of course, our experiences are unique, which is why they matter a lot more. This is a simple idea, and I don't know if even if medical system and the mental health ecosystem is strong, even if in that case peer support is also essential, because sometimes you don't need someone like a medical professional or mental health professional still is in a different power of authority than you are in that dynamic. Sometimes you just want someone who understands you and has been through the exact same thing as you have, and that is something that is very common across people with different minorities identities. So for as we spoke about the unique nature of experiences that someone who's non-binary and trans might have, especially when they have PMDs, there's a lot of, you can't really talk to someone who is cis about your experience as a trans person with PMDs. You can, but they will understand, but they won't relate. And you want someone to relate to. And that's where peer support spaces become extremely crucial. And given the specific experiences that people with PMDs have in terms of your emotional experiences, be it having brain fog or being overwhelmed, out of control, these are not really probably things that you want to speak to a mental health professional about or a medical professional about. You might choose to. Sometimes, if you're feeling it every day, you might want a space WhatsApp chat, maybe, where you just check in, hey, listen, I had an email today and I just spiraled after that. And people are going to be like, listen, I did that last month. You have no idea. Like, I totally relate. That matters a lot, having someone say, not just I understand, but I've been through this and you're going to be okay. We'll figure it out together. It matters a lot. So, because of all of this and how lonely you feel when you have PMDs, because you have all of these experiences, and loneliness is another symptom. I literally cannot stop listing out the symptoms because so many unique experiences that people might face because of how lonely you feel, because nobody understands. Like, if you're going to say, hey, listen, I feel out of control and that is my experience and that's what PMDD is, not many people are going to understand that, and a community helps there. It helps there. So peer support spaces are absolutely crucial for those reasons, and I'm sure for other reasons as well. And with regards to the gaps in the whole PMD scene in India, I would say awareness, we are still at that level where people don't even know. Like we spoke about, it's not included in the medical curriculum. Doctors don't understand it, and that's a major need, because if doctors don't know, then who will actually support you? Of course, therapists are there, and again, finding a therapist and have paying like 2,500 rupees for a session is that's, of course, the amount is justified from the other end, but people cannot also afford it, and all of those things. Awareness is crucial, not just in terms of the other side of the stakeholders, which is your support, all of those providers, but also for the folks ourselves, because like I was talking about, we all always have to advocate for ourselves, unfortunately. So something I'm really passionate about is also kind of taking awareness to people who might have PMDs or like menstruators. So a lot of people actually can see themselves. The rates of people with PMDs is not really like very low also. It's a very real experience that a lot of people feel, even if they don't feel that, right? If I'm gonna say that, listen, relationship issues is actually tied to your period, that might just feel make someone who does not even have PMDs feel seen. Because that is again something that a lot of menstruators go through, might not be really PMDs, but might still be a real experience. So awareness among menstruators is absolutely crucial, and of course advocacy in policy and other things as well. PMDD is recognized as a disability in a lot of countries, which enables reasonable accommodations at work, and that is very crucial, because without reasonable accommodations, this being an episodic disability like we talked about, 2 weeks of the month, if you are going to feel suicidal, you're not going to be able to quote unquote perform as you can usually. We spoke about, you mentioned the capitalist system that we are in, and we can't, a lot of people with PMDs are not able to keep a job, and that just kind of it gets exaggerated when you think about the other identities that they might hold as well. Maybe they feel they face transphobic harassment as well at their workplace, or they face they also have neurodivergence, or maybe another disability as well, where they have a fibro, whatever. When you think about all of these different things, having reasonable accommodations for PMDs as well, having that recognition becomes really crucial. So, and the path to that is obviously advocacy, and liaising with the government, medical system, and helping people understand that this is not just in people's heads, it's a real issue, and we need to focus on that and create policies that again center these experiences and make different places like the healthcare system, workplace system, other public, everything safer and easier to access for people with PMDs as well. So I think those two are the major gaps: awareness and advocacy.
No, you summed it up very succinctly. It has to be from both the ends. You need care, you need support in order to navigate the challenges that we face. But we also need awareness, capacity building of healthcare professionals, and urge the government to invest more, increase funds into this so it helps or supports the healthcare system in order to build these pipelines or educational modules, etc., within their system. So the burden doesn't fall on the person who is experiencing it, and they don't have to navigate this lonely journey, basically. So yes, I completely agree with you on that front. This was lovely and very insightful, Sai. I personally also learned a lot, and to the listeners, we'll make sure to put some resources in the description. So if you want to explore things, if you relate to something, please feel free to do so. And what I loved is that sometimes you just need to feel seen, right? Maybe medicalizing something, pathologizing something might not help all the time. Yes, in some context situations, a diagnosis is important, can be important, but at the same time you also need that community to feel seen, heard, and validated, right? So it's not either or. We need both the systems to work in tandem for the betterment, or like to spread more awareness so as to support people who are experiencing PMDs. But before we wrap up, Sai, any parting thoughts you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to just shout out. So I started Project Hell Week, and that was after a lot of imposter syndrome, because I was like, do I really have PMDD? Am I just making it up? Which is again another thing that everyone goes through. But that, I mean, helps to create peer support, safe spaces for queer trans people, especially with PMDs. And in case you're seeking a peer support space, please do reach out to me. I'm on Instagram, Project Hell Week. I'm also looking to collaborate with people to create educational modules. I do see that as the next logical step for awareness and advocacy that we were just talking about. So, in case if you would like to do that as well, please do reach out to me. I just wanted to shout that out because that might help. But yeah, also I would say that if you think you're experiencing something, you're probably right. You know yourself the best. So don't doubt yourself. I know it's difficult to not do that, but do be assured that you are the most knowledgeable about your own self. So that might just help you in your journey in understanding yourself.
Thanks so much, Sai. And yes, I'll make sure to include your Instagram page in the hyperlinks in the description box when we put out this episode. And to the listeners, if you're hearing this message, you have listened to the entire episode. Thanks for sticking around. You can listen to Atypical Dikkate on Spotify. And this year, we're also expanding to different platforms. You can find us on Amazon Music and all other major podcasting platforms. And if you want to reach out to me, your host Soumya, check out the Linktree link in the description. See ya!